Hello everyone, Professor Squatch here with my next video in my Living Pokedex on Pokemon Home. I have another video on my YouTube channel here showcasing my Generation 1 Living Dex, which includes apparently some hacked Mewtwo, Mew, Shinies. I don't know if they're both hacked or one of them is, but they appear to be hacked. But nonetheless, I have all 151 Pokemon from Generation 1 in Pokemon Home, and I decided to continue my journey. It's been about 3 months since I posted that video, so I figured it was finally time to get around and get Generation 2 into my Pokemon Home. Now, to do this, I was unable to track my progress through video format because I don't have a good way to capture video from my Nintendo 3DS that I have. So I'm just showcasing everything within Pokemon Home here. The games and hardware that I have included will be discussed, and I will go through each Pokemon stating where it's from and if there's anything special to note about it, like if it was on a champion team or if it has some kind of significant meaning to me. So with that, let's get started with the Generation 2 Living Dex video here in Pokemon Home. So starting with a box of 152 through 182, let's first cover what tools I used in order to get these Pokemon. I tried to stay true to the original regions where they were first discovered, so that way I could bring them in and it seemed a little bit more fitting. For example, with Generation 1, I got a lot of my Generation 1 Pokemon from Let's Go Pikachu and Let's Go Eevee because those games are Generation 1 games. They are from that region. So what I did here was on my Nintendo 3DS, I have the Virtual Console version of Pokemon Crystal version, my favorite game of all the Pokemon games by far. It's the one I have played the most in my lifetime. I also used Soul Silver, Pokemon Soul Silver version, which is a Generation 4 game, a remake of Pokemon Gold and Silver. I used that game on my 3DS. I would then use the, I believe it's DS download play to connect it to Pokemon Black or Black 2 using that feature. So 2 DSs, I would transfer them from Soul Silver to Generation 5. And then from there, I would use Poke Transporter on the DS to transfer them to Pokemon Bank and then eventually the Pokemon Home app. I also used in this Pokemon Platinum for trading in order to get some of the trade evolutions. So then, of course, I used either Pokemon Black or Black 2 for the transfer process from Soul Silver, the Poke Transporter app on the DS, the Pokemon Bank app on the DS. I also used Pokemon Omega Ruby for some breeding in some cases, and I used Pokemon Ultra Sun or Sun. I used Sun and Ultra Sun, I believe, both of them, in order to get some of the starters that were harder to get in general. From there, I transferred them up to Pokemon Home, and I also obtained a few from the Generation 8 current games, Pokemon Sword and Shield. So that is where they have all come from. That also required a Nintendo Switch, in case you were curious. So to get started here with numbers 152 through 182, we of course have Chikorita. Chikorita was found in the Alola region, so this comes from my Ultra Sun game. Through the island scan, which is done by scanning QR codes 10 times in a single day on a specific day of the week. If you want information about that, it's easily searchable on Wobbuffet. Bayleaf also comes from that Alola region. I just bred it and hatched another one. And then Meganium, same thing. I bred the Chikorita, got a third one, and evolved it into Meganium. Then I have Cyndaquil, which actually comes from the Hoenn region. This Cyndaquil was bred with the Cyndaquil that I chose as my Hoenn, or as my Johto starter after I beat Omega Ruby. Same thing with Quilava. I bred it and evolved it in Omega Ruby. And Typhlosion was also bred in Omega Ruby and evolved. I will note that I used Typhlosion in my Crystal playthrough on the Virtual Console and in my Soul Silver playthrough because Typhlosion is my favorite starter fully evolved form from Generation 2. Next up is Totodile, which I got in Ultra Sun through the Island Scan. Same with Croconaw, bred it, evolved it, Ultra Sun. Ultra Sun for Feraligatr as well. Sentret, though, comes from Johto in the good old days. Whenever you see it says the good old days, that means it has come from the Virtual Console game on the Nintendo 3DS. So this comes from the Crystal version game. This one, Furret, comes from the Johto region, actually in a Safari Ball or a Park Ball, which comes from the Safari Zone in Pokemon Soul Silver. So this comes from the Generation 4 game, transferred to Black and White, and then into Bank, and then into Home. We'll see a lot more like that, including this Hoot, which also comes from Soul Silver. We have Noctowl coming in from Soul Silver as well. This is not the one that I used on my team, but I did use a Noctowl on my team for a while. We have Ladybug coming in from Pokemon Crystal on the Virtual Console. Ledian coming in from Soul Silver. Spinarak, which actually comes from my Pokemon Fire Red game. I actually did not mention this in my hardware that's included. Pokemon Fire Red was also used to transfer from Fire Red into Soul Silver through the what's it called? The PAL Park. It's through the PAL Park. So Spinarak actually comes from the Generation 3 remakes of the Generation 1 games, and this one comes from Pokemon Fire Red. Ariados comes from Soul Silver. Chinchou from Soul Silver, as well as its evolution Lantern. Pichu is actually the gift Pichu that you get in Pokemon Home. I can't remember what I did to get this, but if you search how to get Pichu in Pokemon Home, you should be able to figure out how to get it as a gift Pokemon in Pokemon Home. This Cleffa comes from the Generation 8 Galar region. I believe I got this in a surprise trade, so I just used it here so I didn't have to worry about breeding it in the older games. Igglybuff comes from Soul Silver. Togepi comes from Soul Silver. Togetic comes from the Galar region Pokemon Sword. This one was a surprise trade to me from a trainer named Sasuke. This Natu comes from Pokemon Fire Red as well. In one of the areas in that game that you can catch it. So this was transferred into Soul Silver and so on. And you can see my real name is used here instead of Squatch because this was before I became Professor Squatch. Xatu comes from Omega Ruby, actually. So that's kind of cool. Mareep comes from Soul Silver. So does Flaffy and Ampharos here. And this Ampharos is actually from my championship team in Soul Silver. I decided to bring it on up through because it has a lot of meaning to me, and I would love to use it if they allow Ampharos in any of the future games. Blossom comes from Soul Silver. All right, moving on to the next box. Numbers 183 through 212, Meryl to Scizor. Starting with Meryl here, Meryl comes from Omega Ruby. Azumarill comes from Soul Silver. Sudowoodo comes from Soul Silver as well. And so does Politoed. Hoppip comes from the Virtual Console Crystal version, but Skiploom and Jumpluff come from Soul Silver. Apom comes from Soul Silver, and Sunkern actually comes from Omega Ruby, as well as Sunflora. I just found it easier that I already had a Sunstone in Omega Ruby, so I could evolve a Sunkern that I already had. Yanma comes from the Alola region. I actually got this as a part of my either Ultra Sun or Sun game. It was already in the box when I bought the game, so I just brought it in, so I already have one. So thank you to trainer Sonails for this. Wooper comes from the Virtual Console Crystal version, and so does Quagsire. Espeon is actually one of the wild Pokemon that you can catch in the wild area on a certain day based on the weather in Pokemon Sword. So Espeon comes from the Galar region. This Umbreon, though, comes from the Johto region. It actually appears to be either bred or obtained through a Master Ball. I am not entirely sure how that is. This was coming from a trainer named Gold. It was in the box already in my Pokemon Soul Silver game. And yeah, it's from Pokemon Soul Silver. Murkrow comes from Soul Silver, as does Slowking, as does Mischievous, as does Unknown. And then we have Wobbuffet. Wobbuffet comes from Pokemon Sword because they're just everywhere. I already had one, so I just threw it in here. Didn't want to look for one in the older games. Girafarig comes from Soul Silver. Pineco actually comes from my Pokemon Crystal Virtual Console game, and so does Fortress. Fortress actually spent some time on my team in the Crystal game before I decided to trade it out for Suicune in the Elite Four. Gligar comes from the Pokemon Crystal Virtual Console. Dunsparce comes from Soul Silver. Steelix actually comes from the Galar region. It's one of the ones that spawns randomly in the wild area based on weather conditions. I figured I already had it here, so I didn't have to worry about spending a metal coat and trading it in the older games where those items are a lot more limited. Snubbull comes from the good old days in the Crystal version Virtual Console. Granbull comes from Soul Silver. Quillfish actually comes from the Galar region because it's a little bit harder to find in Soul Silver in the older games without fishing a bunch, so I already had it from my Pokemon Sword game, so I brought it in. Scizor actually comes from the Pokemon Generation 4 Sinnoh region, so I caught Scyther in my Pokemon Platinum game and traded it to Soul Silver with a metal coat. That was the easiest way to obtain it, as Scyther is a lot harder to catch in Soul Silver versus in Pokemon Platinum. And we're back at the beginning of the box, so on to the next box. 213 through 242, Shuckle to Blissey. Shuckle, of course, a fan favorite for being notoriously pretty much worthless. But here I caught the Shuckle in the Galar region. I didn't want to feel like a jerk and steal the Shuckle that is the trainers from Soul Silver instead of, giving it back to him after some time. Or I didn't even want to have to breed it or anything, so I just decided, hey, I already have Shuckle from Pokemon Sword. Heracross actually comes from my Pokemon Fire Red game, as you can see denoted by my original trainer name of Not Squatch. Sneasel comes from Pokemon Sword as well, as Sneasel are actually pretty popular, especially in snowy weather in the wild area, so I just had an extra one laying around. Teddiursa comes from Pokemon Soul Silver, as does Ursaring. Then we have Slugma, which comes from my Omega Ruby game. It was actually a little bit easier to find there than trying to progress to a certain point in Soul Silver. But Magcargo comes from the Soul Silver game, as I did manage either catching this or finding... Or no, actually, this one comes from Gold, the trainer, the original owner of the game, who left it in his box. And we have Swinub, which comes from my Pokemon Fire Red game once again. And then we have Piloswine, which comes from the Generation 8 Pokemon Sword region in Galar. It's just a spare one that I had. Corsola comes from Soul Silver. And Remoraid comes from Soul Silver as well, as does Octillery. And then Delibird actually comes from the Galar region. Again, I already had a spare, didn't want to have to worry about going and catching it in Soul Silver. And we have Mantine, which comes from Pokemon Sword as well, another spare. Skarmory, which comes from Soul Silver. Skarmory is by far one of my favorite flying type Pokemon ever, and also one of my favorites from Generation 2. Houndour comes from Soul Silver, and so does Houndoom. Kingdra, another one of my all-time favorites in Generation 2, also comes from Soul Silver. I used Platinum to trade between to get my Kingdra from a Seadra. Phanpy comes from my Pokemon Fire Red version, so it's originally from the Kanto region, which is a little strange. And then Donphan comes from my Pokemon Crystal version Virtual Console, so that's kind of cool as well. Porygon 2 is actually evolved from the gift Porygon that you get in Pokemon Platinum. So I took that and traded it to my Soul Silver game with the Dubious Disc, or the upgrade. It's evolved. This one is evolved through the upgrade, so I traded it with upgrade, and it's originally from Pokemon Platinum's Sinnoh region, which is kind of cool. Stantler comes from Soul Silver and is another Pokemon left behind by Gold. Apparently in a Master Ball. Again, not really sure where all these Master Balls have come from, but it was in the box already when I bought Soul Silver. Smeargle here comes from the Alola region, so I actually grabbed this from either Ultra Sun or Sun. I'm not entirely sure which one, but it was already in a box from this trainer named Jennifer in the game that I purchased. Then we have Tyrogue, which comes from Soul Silver. It was a gift, I'm sure the in-game gift one that you get. And this was given to that trainer Gold, who was the original owner of my Soul Silver cartridge. So thank you to Gold once again. Hitmontop, same thing, was a former Pokemon of Gold's and is from Soul Silver. Smoochum comes from Soul Silver. I hatched this myself, as I did Elekid and Magby. Miltank comes from my Pokemon Crystal Virtual Console game. It actually took me like an hour to catch this. Blissey, the final Pokemon in this box, also comes from Soul Silver, a catch of my own as well. So that's it for that box, and now we're on to the final box already. Is Generation 2 only added 100 new Pokemon, and these are by far the most interesting ones in this. So here we go, let's get into it. So this Raikou comes from that trainer Gold, who had left it in his box in Pokemon Soul Silver when I purchased the game. So does Entei, and so does Suicune. I actually do have all three of them myself in my Soul Silver. I also have them from Omega Ruby, and I also have them from Ultra Sun. They aren't all in my Pokemon Home though, so I just decided to use these ones that I don't really have any emotional attachment to for this video, just because I think it's kind of cool to have Pokemon from somebody else. And then we have Larvae Thar. Larvae Thar here comes from the Galar region. Larvae Thar, Pupitar, and Tyranitar is by far my all-time favorite evolution line. I know it doesn't necessarily make sense when you look at them because it's, you know, he turns into this little cocoon at some point, but Tyranitar is one of my all-time favorites, if not my all-time favorite Pokemon. And this Larvae Thar comes from Pokemon Sword, and this might actually be the one that I got in the, or no, I hatched this one, sorry. I hatched this one, but I did get one as a special raid gift because it's not in Pokemon Sword. When I bought the double pack of the games when they came out, when you pre-ordered, you got special codes. I've breeded it intensively. I have a bunch of them. I actually have a shiny Larvae Thar as well that I didn't include in this because it's being currently used in my Pokemon Shield playthrough. Pupitar is next, and this Pupitar actually comes from Soul Silver. I caught this in my Soul Silver game, evolved it into Pupitar, and then just decided I'm going to just send it up as is. I am planning on, you know, doing that with Tyranitar at some point as well. And then lastly, Tyranitar from the Galar region. It's not on my champion team or anything, but I did evolve this from one of the Larvae Thars that I had originally gotten in Pokemon Sword. And yeah, it's in here, but Tyranitar by far one of my all-time favorites. Now on to the final legendaries. We have Lugia here, which actually comes from the trainer Ace, who gave me some Generation 1 Pokemon as well when I either bought Sun or Ultra Sun. I believe it was Ultra Sun. It was already in the box. I transferred it up through the Pokemon Bank to home. So this is actually a Lugia from the Alola region in the Ultra Wormholes. So that's pretty cool. And then we have Ho-Oh, a level 100 Ho-Oh that was also Trainer Gold's from Soul Silver. He had it in his box originally. And yeah, I don't know if this is anything really special beyond it has its signature move, Sacred Fire. It's a level 100 and it appears to be in a different kind of Pokeball. But other than that, yeah, it's a level 100 Ho-Oh. And then, of course, the final Pokemon in Generation 2 in my Living Dex is this Celebi. Celebi is an extremely hard Pokemon to obtain now because it is a mythical Pokemon, and usually these are only distributed at random times throughout a game's life cycle. You actually could not catch Celebi in the original Generation 2 games without some kind of event. You couldn't catch it in Generation 3 games without some kind of event, and so on. Finally, what they did is when they released Pokemon Crystal on the Virtual Console, after you complete the game, after you beat the Elite Four, you don't have to beat Red, you just have to beat the Elite Four and become champion. You can go to Kurt in Azalea Town, and he will make the special GS Ball, which is actually, I believe, the exact same thing that you would get in the event from back in Generation 2. When those games were first released, you get this GS Ball and you go place it in the shrine. It takes 24 hours to get it, but it's not that difficult. You place it in the shrine in Ilex Forest, right next to Azalea Town, and Celebi appears at level 30, and you can actually catch it in the Virtual Console game, and then you can use the Poke Transporter app on the Nintendo 3DS to move it into Pokemon Bank, and then use the Pokemon Home app to move it in to Pokemon Home from bank. So this Celebi actually comes from that playthrough of my Virtual Console Crystal version, which is really cool. It also then becomes, if you start a new game, it becomes a repeatable way to farm getting Celebis if you want to trade them out to others. And you can also even potentially get it shiny. I did want to try to showcase some shiny Celebi that was in the Pokemon Soul Silver box from that Trainer Gold, but they definitely appeared to be hacked, as I was unable to transport them using Poke Transporter into Pokemon Bank and then bring it into Pokemon Home. They actually had it built in to block whatever kind of Pokemon it was, so I'm assuming it was hacked in some way. So unfortunately, I wasn't able to show any shinies. But in the long run, I think this is pretty cool. So that's it for my Pokemon Living Dex in Generation 2. As you can see, we have every single one of them. One of every one is very unconventional methods of getting it. It took forever because of how I did it. It wasn't the fastest or easiest ways. There's definitely easier ways to get these. And maybe at some point I'll try to cover that. But for now, that's my Living Dex Part 2 with Generation 2. The next thing I'll be working on is the Hoenn Dex, which I have already got mostly complete thanks to my Omega Ruby version on my Nintendo 3DS. So until next time, be sure to like the video if you enjoyed how I gathered these, or if you find anything interesting about it. Comment your thoughts about my Generation 2 Living Dex, and be sure to subscribe for more Pokemon content as I am ramping up production of videos once again. And we look forward to the next content release in Pokemon Sword and Shield this fall. So until next time, trainers, this is Professor Squatch.